What's going on, everybody? Teach back again with another video, and today we are fixing the Atlanta Falcons in our Fix the Franchise series. I've had a couple Atlanta fans tell me they're excited for this, so hopefully it meets and exceeds your expectations. But before we get started, be sure to let me know, especially if you're a Falcons fan, what moves would you make this offseason to fix Atlanta and get them back towards the top of the NFC South where they were a little more than half a decade ago, I guess it's been now. So let me know what moves you would make in free agency, the draft, what they could potentially do in regards to trades. Do you think Desmond Ridder takes a step forward next year at the quarterback spot? Or do you think they should be in the quarterback market, draft, or free agency-wise? Love to hear your thoughts, whether you're a Falcons fan or just a big NFL head like myself and want to talk some football with me down below in the comment section. So obviously Atlanta coming off a 7-10 season. And it's kind of back-to-back years where I think their record it speaks more positively than I think the roster does. So ton of credit to Arthur Smith, and it kind of sucks because, a little quick diatribe here. I feel like this team should be in the quarterback market. I feel like if I'm Arthur Smith, I'm saying, hey, give me Anthony Richardson at 7. Let me add that running ability into my offense. Or if CJ Stroud's there at 7, or Will Levis, or whoever ends up being available potentially there at 7. I feel like Atlanta should be in that market because if Desmond Ridder doesn't work out and this team's picking towards the top of the draft board in 2024, that's great. Maybe you're adding a Caleb Williams, a Drake May, or Quinn Ewers or something like that. But is Arthur Smith there to make that pick? I doubt it. I doubt if you're picking in the top 5 to 10 3 years in a row. I seriously doubt that head coach is still in that position, despite I think he is doing a decent amount to maximize the talent that they have in that roster. Anyways, that point aside, they do have a fair amount of draft assets to use, 9 in total. And let me just quickly mention, I had somebody correctly point out in the Rams video, I wasn't including comp picks, so that is an error on my end. Pro Football Network does not include that, so that is my fault. But nonetheless, I did not see any comp picks for Atlanta. So I believe it is 9, and I believe that is the correct number. But if I am wrong and there is a comp picks in the mix, let me know down below in the comment section. And they also have the second most cap space in the NFL, so that's got to be really exciting if you're an Atlanta fan. Fun note, though, Chicago, who is number 1, has almost double, if not double that number, $56.04 million, which is absolutely bananas. So let's talk about free agency. This first point, especially if you're a Falcons fan, let me know how you feel about some of these players. Isaiah Oliver, Rashad Fenton, Elijah Wilkinson. If they're cheap, I think you bring them back. I was looking at the PFF grades for Oliver, and he was a player I liked a ton coming out of Colorado. I was a big Isaiah Oliver fan, and I think he's been okay. He's primarily been that nickel corner. So if you can get him for relatively cheap, 2-3 year contract, ride out Oliver's 20s basically, I don't think I hate it. And then Rashad Fenton got hurt pretty early on. I think less than 70 snaps played last year. So didn't really get a fair shot to see what he's all about. I could see him going back to Kansas City also, especially if the Chiefs win a Super Bowl. That makes them that much more of a alluring of a destination. But nonetheless, I think with Casey Hayward ideally coming back, he had a 2-year contract signed last year. Fenton, Oliver. I think if you bring back Oliver and Fenton for cheap, then you're talking about 4 corners. Terrell's the headliner, and then Hayward, Fenton, and Oliver, who are all veterans. And if they're all affordable, that's a really solid rotation. Oliver, ideally, then in the slot, you can have Fenton and Hayward competing for that outside corner spot. And then Elijah Wilkinson, I included him here because, you look at the offensive line, I think across the board, it performed really well for the Falcons last year. Namely, Chris Lindstrom became one of the best guards in football. Keelan McGarry here had a career year. And a lot of it is Arthur Smith's run scheme. He draws it up and they block it up really, really well, and those guys benefited from it. And also, as an offensive lineman, easier work forward versus backwards, right? Run blocking a little bit of an easier assignment, in my opinion, than pass protection if you have that strength in your profile. So the reason I also included all 3 of these guys, if they're cheap, 1, you have the cap space, but 2, this team has enough holes as is. So if at all possible, if I can get one of Oliver or Fenton back, it's okay, I know there is at least, starting level players in the secondary. If they get Oliver to play the nickel, Hayward comes back healthy, Terrell, okay, cool. We got 3 corners that we can feel comfortable trotting out. And Wilkinson, it's hey, I don't really want to open up an offensive line hole when I need to address edge, interior defensive line, linebacker. I'd love to get a corner of the future. We could add safety, so hopefully that argument makes sense that if these guys are not that expensive, go ahead and just patch up that little bit of the roster spot and then try to minimize the holes that you're looking to spend big money on in free agency or heavy draft capital on. So anyways, leaving that, take some shots on some young players, throw out some names that were kind of interesting to me. I kind of want to start backwards actually. So Devin Bush, you move on from Deion Jones, felt like that linebacker spot was up in the air. I do like Troy Anderson from Montana State from last year. Montana State, that does sound right. But linebacker that was previously a running back, high-end athlete, ran a 4.42 40. just needs to learn a little bit more about the position, and he's not necessarily the biggest guy. So maybe Devin Bush, another sub 6-foot linebacker, isn't necessarily the fit, but he's a linebacker with a ton of athleticism in his mid-20s. He's not even 26 yet. So to me, the timeline and the potential of hitting big on a young linebacker with that type of athletic ability was alluring. And again, I don't even think he'll cost that much because he's kind of been a disappointment in Pittsburgh. Cam Sutton, another former Steeler. I think this could be a fun addition, especially if you didn't bring back a Fenton, didn't bring back an Oliver. Sutton played both inside and out. So I could also see a really fun secondary of Terrell, Hayward, and Sutton. That would be a really interesting mix. And also another young player, 26, going to be 27 midway through next year. So kind of picking up on the theme here. Darius Slayton, I do think this team could use another wide receiver. I think Slayton is a really nice complement to what Drake London is. London does not have that long speed. He is much more of that underneath intermediate route runner who's also great with the ball in his hands as a hard guy to bring down with his size and a good combination of quickness to go with it. So adding that over-the-top burner, deep route running type of wide receiver to Darius Slayton, to me, is really attractive and hopefully opens up the offense. Especially, Desmond Ridder has good running ability. That run game in and of itself, Arthur Smith, again, does a really good job, blocking up and drawing up some advantages there and blocking, just from a blocking perspective. And then, Tyler Algier, big hit last year. Cordero Patterson, I really like as a running back as well. So adding that deep speed, forcing safeties up in the box to play the run, and then Slayton hitting him over the top. I feel like that's a really fun element to add to this offense. And then lastly, Mark Davenport. This is a tough one because I feel like he's going to be really kind of hit or miss depending on who the fan base is. In his mid-20s, I think 26 and a half, maybe 27 by the time we get to the start of next year. And, former first-round pick, New Orleans, you're taking him from a division rival. I think that's always a fun element to throw into the mix. And a guy that the Saints gave up an extra first-round pick, basically their first-rounder that year and a future first to move up and get him. So clearly has a lot of traits that the NFL will covet. But coming off of, depending on, where you read, I think it was half sack official from the NFL, 1 sack if you're looking at, PFF stuff, and, it could be charted differently across the board. But all that to say, Mark Davenport did not have a whole lot of pass rush production last year, despite being a guy with an ideal frame and awesome athletic ability and previous years of being a good run defender and a pass rusher. Also a guy with a smaller role. Now, New Orleans has always had a nice steady rotation. I don't think Mark Davenport ever played more than 600 snaps in New Orleans, which is interesting because if Atlanta signs him, they're going to want him to play as many snaps as possible. So may not be the best fit, but it's intriguing to take him away from a division rival, a team that needs edge. And if you sign to Davenport, maybe that takes us into our draft conversation here. Maybe that changes up what you're thinking about at 7. To me, best defensive player available. Don't even think about the position. If you got Myles Murphy as the highest ranked defender on the board, by the time you get to 7, that's the pick. If it's Tyree Wilson, that's the pick. If it's Devon Witherspoon, if it's Christian Gonzalez, that's the pick. I talked about those corners earlier on, and really I'm just trying to build a stable baseline for the Falcons, but they can get better. So if they brought back Oliver and didn't sign Cam Sutton, so their cornerback room is Terrell, Casey Hayward, and Isaiah Oliver. There's nothing saying you can't draft a corner and get better there, especially considering you'd be going into the last year of Casey Hayward. Maybe he becomes a trade piece. I'm talking about a lot of different hypotheticals here, but nonetheless, hopefully I'm conveying that point. But I think you go into pick 7 with whatever the best defensive player on the board is, that's our pick. Unless Arthur Smith can, talk him into being in the QB market. Like if CJ Stroud's there at 7, Will Levis is there at 7. If I'm Arthur Smith, I'm pounding on the table because otherwise I got to get roughly 500 and be in the teens next year if I'm keeping my job. And even then, like if they go 8, 9 and they're picking 12, like I don't know if he's necessarily all that safe. He could be, he might not be. So I'd be pounding the table for quarterback, but I could also see, let's give Ridder the Davis Mills treatment. Let's give him a shot. Let's go best defensive player at 7. And if they go that route, not mad. And to me, I think this class, especially in the top 10, you're probably going defensive line. You're probably going Murphy. You're probably going Tyree Wilson, right? You're probably going Lucas Van Ness, one of those 3. I think makes the most sense. So then, top of the second round, I think they had picked 36, 37, something like that. But early on in the second round, take a corner. This cornerback class is loaded. I mean, there's going to be a bunch of guys who linger around into round 2 that most years would be round 1 guys. Like I could see Garrett Williams being there. I could see Emmanuel Forbes, still being on the board. Just to name a couple of guys. I don't think Tyreek Stevenson's, maybe. Tyreek Stevenson could be a fringe late 1, early day 2 guy. I could see it. Jalen Jones, maybe if he gets, the stock boost late, if he has a good combine, I could see that as well. So just throwing in a couple names, I think that's a sweet spot to add a corner if you already go edge. Or if it's the other way around, like I said right here, or flipped, if you take Devon Witherspoon at 7, this is also a deep edge class, so they're in the mid-30s. You're talking about Isaiah Foskey, B.J. Ojulari, Felix Ndike Ozama, Derek Hall, Will McDonald, plenty of options you can pick from there. So even saying it out loud, I'm kind of thinking maybe they should go corner at 7 and then edge second round. Either way, this draft class is uniquely gifted in those two areas where the Falcons need to get better and also need some younger talent long-term wise. And then other position groups, basically the entire front seven. Like Grady Jarrett's a really nice piece, but there have been, 2-3 years now worth of conversations about moving on from him and his contract. So even if he's there, I mean, like a nose tackle or a 3-tech, if you want to play Jarrett over the center at that nose spot, you could get an upgrade there for sure. Edge, obviously, we've already talked about that. Linebacker, already talked about that. They can definitely get better there. And in the secondary, like safety, I'd love to see if they can add... I think Tyler Nubin decided to go back to Minnesota off the top of my head. But, if they could add Brandon Joseph from Notre Dame, a true free safety, and then Richie Grant kind of transitions to that strong safety role, I'd be here for that. I'd be really interested by that selection if it happened on day 2, maybe even early day 3. And then again, another wide receiver. If they miss out on Darius Slayton or another one of those young, speedy wide receivers, I think this draft class has some options for you. Maybe a Marvin Mims round 3 or 4. That could be an interesting addition. And a nice replacement for Olamides Zaccheaus as well, so who's going to be a free agent this offseason. So a team with a lot of different holes in the roster. So that's, again, going back to what I was talking about with free agency. Try to, as best you can, patch up those holes with at least like NFL competent players. Because then you go to the draft with a sober view of the board and say, yeah, we think Tyree Wilson's the best player available. We're going to take him at 7. Or we think Christian Gonzalez is the best player available at 7. And then you get to the mid-30s, their second round pick, and it's like, hey, B.J. Ojulari is the best player available. However it ends up playing out, try to patch up as many of those holes as you can. You have a lot of money to spend, so I think that allows you to be able to do that while also still trying to land a big, free agent name, maybe like a Marcus Davenport. So really interesting squad to focus on this offseason. And the reason they have all this money is because, they kind of paid their dues moving on from Matt Ryan last year. So it showcases sometimes those pills you don't want to swallow with those dead cap hits, long term, it's sometimes the right decision. I certainly think they made the right choice moving on from Matt Ryan last year. So final notes here. Again, I think Arthur Smith has done a lot with a little, and I do want to give him credit. Again, it's 2 years in a row where I think their record is inflated beyond what I think the talent on the roster says they should be. And if Desmond Ridder takes a step forward at the quarterback position, that offense is going to be fun. They were fun to watch last year, and I don't think Marcus Mariota played very well at all. So, another year of Drake London getting better. If Kyle Pitts stays healthy, that's obviously a really fun 1-2 punch at a receiver position. If they add another guy there, then it's like, okay, now this offense is really taking form. The offensive line is good. I love Tyler Algier. Love that selection in the 5th round. I thought they got great value on him, and he's really broke onto the scene as a guy that I don't think a lot of people were talking about out of last year's running back class. So that's great to see. But really, this comes down to the defense. Like, if Ridder takes a step forward, this team's going to have to score 30 a game just to keep them afloat if they don't fix that defense, right? So what adjustments can you make? How quick in that number 7 pick, if it is a defensive player, how quick of an impact can they make? Those are the questions that, once we get answers, are going to dictate where this Falcons team goes next year. So that's going to do it for my Fix the Franchise for the Atlanta Falcons. A really fun team, and because of high draft capital and a lot of free agent money to spend, it feels kind of promising and feels like they can go a lot of different directions. So if you're a Falcons fan or just a big NFL fan, let me know what you would do to fix the Atlanta Falcons this offseason. What moves you make in free agency, what signings, what trades do you think could happen? And then ultimately, who are you picking at 7? I think that's the most interesting question. Is it quarterback? Is it edge? Is it corner? Love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. But if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to hit that like button. It helped me and the channel out a ton. If you're out here and want to see more football content, more coverage of each and every NFL team, hit that big red subscribe button. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.